Well, hey, again, guys, thank you so much for being here tonight and for worshiping with us, eating with us, getting God's Word together here in just a second. It's just so good. It seems like we thought 2021 would be easier because 2021 or 2020, I don't even know what year it is, set such a brutal standard, right? But there's always something around the corner, man, that just makes things seem a little crazy, a little chaotic. And it's so good to come together and sing about Jesus. It's such a dark time about a God who literally makes the darkness tremble. You know what I mean? There's so much comfort in that. And so thank you guys for singing with us tonight. And I'm excited to get into God's Word. Last week we started a series entitled Beginner's Guide to Destructive Dating. And it was my promise that I would tell you guys how to ruin every one of your relationships. Specifically dating, but it really extends to everything else. It can be applied to friendships. It can be applied to all sorts of stuff. And so stuff to do to really just mess things up. And the reason for this, guys, listen, and it's kind of playful, but the reason for the series is because dating can be tough, and it can be weird, and it can be frustrating, especially in our society, in our generation, where people don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do it well. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how to do this this thing called dating a little bit better, because we all, I think, if you've dated to any extent, you know this. It's pretty easy to mess things up. Am I the only one that's messed things up? And okay, no one else is raising their hands. I see you guys. My wife, I see. Thanks, babe. I guess no one else has messed things up dating. So close your Bibles. We're going home. No, the point of this is for me to tell you how to mess it up. I don't know. I was getting ready for tonight. I was thinking about some of the stuff I've done that just didn't work out well in dating relationships. And one thing that always comes up is about 7 or 8 years ago, Aaron and I were dating. We were in high school, and we were, it was in the first couple years of our dating relationship, and so things were good, things were great. I just decided one day, I didn't decide, I guess someone decided for me, that my wisdom teeth needed to come out. Anybody had your wisdom teeth taken out? Yeah, that's always fun, right? It honestly really is until afterwards, because you just fall asleep and you wake up and everything's done. So some people are really funny when they're medically high, I mean, for lack of a better term, and some people are not. And I think I'm one of those not people. You know what I mean? And so I was just kind of boring, kind of whatever. And so I go home. I get home after a couple of hours. They take out my wisdom teeth. I'm still pretty loopy. Things are spinning. I just can't keep my eyes open. And I have the worst idea ever. I'm like, I'm going to text Erin because she's my girlfriend and I love her. And I'm just going to say, hey, what's up, baby? The problem is I didn't say that. Keep in mind, guys, I meant this out of the bottom of my heart as a sincere compliment, because I wasn't thinking straight. My distorted, wisdom toothless brain was like, this sounds like a good thing to say. So I text her, and I say something that guys, take notes, never say this. I said, hey, muffin top. I said, hey, muffin top. Now listen, guys, I sincerely meant that as a compliment. Wow, she's getting hugs. Okay, wow. Really feel bad for her. Yeah, and so if you're unaware, muffin top typically refers to, something. Do what? Okay, I was just making sure everybody knows. It wasn't true of her, okay? It's not true of her. I just said it. And that was a big mistake. And so, anyways, long story short, don't do that unless you're dating a girl who's super cool and awesome and looks past those things. Thanks, babe, because that wasn't the last time I've messed up. So, all that to say, there's a lot of ways you can mess up a dating relationship, and we're just talking about a few of them. But the ones we're talking about, I think, are the highlights, man. The stuff we can't afford to get wrong. And so, with that said, really the way we've been approaching this, we're going to continue approaching this, is you may or may not be aware of this, but Scripture doesn't actually specifically talk to dating. You know what I mean? Because the idea of dating someone is relatively new. Like, we're talking about like 150 years old, if that, right? It's not very It's not very old. So they don't talk about it in Scripture, but they talk a whole lot about relationships and about how to go about those in a godly way. And when they don't talk about it, they give us stories of when people absolutely jacked it up. And so our goal this series has been to look at these people that really make a mess of things and to learn from their mistakes. So last week we started with a dude named Samson. And man, it was some brutal stuff. And so tonight we are actually going to continue talking about a dude named Samson because he had a couple go-arounds with some bad relationships. And so last week I entitled the message, Foxes and Fake Friends. Tonight I've entitled the message, Hey There, Delilah, because I couldn't think of anything else. And I was getting, major nostalgia reading Delilah's name over and over, and I couldn't help but think of the Plain White T's. You guys still remember that song? Did I just date myself a little bit? Yeah. Okay, good. Plain White T's used to be the thing back when they were in iCarly and we were in high school, but that's all past now. That's okay. And so here's the deal, man. We're going to look at the life of Samson. And so last week we looked at his life and in a relationship that he had with a woman that, truthfully, we don't even know her name. We never learned her name in the story. It was just a dude that, not a dude, it was just a lady that Samson was walking through the streets one day, saw, and was like, I want to marry her, right? Didn't say a word to her. Didn't know her name, nothing like that. Was just like, I think I'm going to marry her, and all that stuff, and we talked about that mess and what happened there. And here's what we learned, man. We talked about 3 habits, 3 principles that if we applied from Samson's life last week, we would pretty much guaranteed be able to wreck our relationships now. And so here's what they were, just kind of a recap. 1, we talked about how if we want to destroy our relationships, we ought to sacrifice spiritual depth for superficial desire. We also talked about how if we want to destroy our relationships, we need to ignore all godly counsel. And lastly, we talked about how we need to consider our mistakes beyond the grasp of God's redemption. That's what we talked about last week. About how if you want to make a mess of your relationships, here you go. Here's just the beginning, man. We've got a couple more weeks, but this is a good place to start. Do these things, and I promise your relationship is not going to be what you want it to be. And so tonight we want to once again look at the life of Samson. We're going to be in Judges chapter 16 tonight. Judges chapter 16. If the screen will move, it might not. Alex, can you move the screen for me back there? Thanks, dude. And so here's the deal. Judges chapter 16, we're going to start in verse number 4 and work our way through the chapter. And let me just kind of, again, catch you up on last week. Samson married a Philistine woman. They threw a big party to celebrate it with fake friends who didn't really care about him. He asked this riddle. Do you guys remember? He asked a riddle about to his fake friends, and they're like, if you can get this right, I'll give you so much stuff. And they're like, all right, deal, right? And so bottom line is they couldn't figure it out. So they go to his new wife, right? And they're like, hey, if you tell us the answer, we won't kill you and your family. That's essentially how the story goes. Really intense stakes there, right? And so she's like, all right, fine, I'll figure it out. They figure it out. Bottom line is the relationship ends really badly. She ends up marrying one of the dudes at the party who Samson didn't even know or like. And Samson ends up killing a bunch of people, including this thing with foxes, right? It was an intense thing there at the end, and it was a disaster, man. And so here we go, chapter 16. In the first 3 verses, really, he meets another woman. Again, we never learn her name. She's actually a prostitute. And so he sleeps with her a little bit. He wakes up the next day. They're trying to attack him, and he literally carries out the gate walls and the doors and stuff. It's pretty cool. Strong guy. That's the whole point. Now look at verse number 4. This is where our story picks up tonight. And listen, guys, I want to encourage you. I know Samson and Delilah, right? This is stuff we've been hearing all our lives. No. Pay attention tonight. Listen to this, man. I want you to be engaged tonight as we work through this. Look at verse number 4. It says this, and it came to pass afterward that he, being Samson, right, he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. So here's what's funny about Samson, dude. Everything that's said about him regarding his relationships makes you believe he's a real romantic. You know what I mean? It said that he just loved this woman who was in this valley of Sorek. The valley of Sorek is a geographical location, of course, that is located between the Mediterranean Sea and the city of Jerusalem. Last week we talked about a city named Timnah, where he met this woman and he married her. Just a little south of that, but on really the Philistine side, typically is the Valley of Sorek. And so he's hanging out up this valley. It really serves as a barrier between Israel and the Philistines, who, if you guys remember, listen, it's important, were enemies at the time, right? The Philistines and the Israelites hated each other. They were always getting at each other. And so he is walking up and down this valley. He's hanging out around this valley. He keeps meeting these women, and he keeps falling in love or sleeping with them, one or the other, typically not both. Right? And so this keeps happening to him, and that's what happens here in verse number 4. Now look at verse number 5. I love this, man. And the lords of the Philistines came up unto her and said unto her, entice him, right? See where his great strength lies, and by what means we can prevail against him, that we can bind him, to afflict him, or to humble him, and we will give you, every single one of us, 1,100 pieces of silver. So let me give you the story, okay? I want to point this out to you guys. Samson and Delilah aren't married, okay? There's nothing in Scripture that gives us that evidence. It says he loved a woman named Delilah, and while they are hanging out, whatever kind of relationship they were having, right, these 5 Philistine, it says the Philistine lords, right, these are the captains, the leaders of the people, the Philistines, and they were spread out across 5 cities, very important cities, and they all came to Delilah, and here's what they said. They said, hey, if you can find out why he's so strong, and you can tell us how to beat him, we will give you, it says, 1,100 pieces of silver, not silver, because that's nothing, silver per person, right? So 5 of them, do the math, that's 5,500 pieces of silver. You're like, okay, cool, like, what does that even mean? It sounds like talking about like pirates or something, silver coins and stuff. It's a shekel, and here's what's cool about this, man. You look at the next chapter, in chapter 17, and we find that 10 silver shekels is what's offered to a man for his annual salary. Think about that for a second. 10 of those equaled this man's salary for a year. She was just promised 5,500 of them, right? Like 550 years worth of wages they're promising her if she will do this. Like we always hate on Delilah, like what a jerk, right? But dude, this is a fortune. This is a lot of money. And I'm obviously not justifying it, but just to help us understand what she's doing, like that's a big motivation. You know what I mean? Like I've seen college students do dumb stuff for $10, right? Now we're talking about 510 years worth of wages, and she's like, okay, that sounds pretty good. Plus, you got to think about it this way. You know what Samson's been doing the past couple chapters? He's been killing her people. Now, we don't know for sure that she was a Philistine, but most likely she's being approached by their leadership. She's in this valley. She's not opposed to it. She seems to want to help them. So most likely is, based off of his history and where they're at, she's a Philistine, which means that she doesn't care about Israel anyways. So here's her opportunity. She's like, I got a chance to sell this dude out, get crazy rich, and help save some people of my own. Like, there's an obvious answer here, right? You know what I mean? But the problem was, Samson loved her, right? Samson loved her. So check this out, man. Verse number 6, let's get into the story. Delilah said to Samson, tell me, please, right, I pray, wherein your strength lies and how in the world, or wherein your might be bound to afflict you. So here's what she asked. She walks up and she's like, Samson, honey, babe, where is your strength? Like, why are you so strong? And then she says, oh, and what could someone do to really destroy you? That's the question here. And I love Samson's response. Look at verse number 7. Samson said unto her, if they bind me with 7 green withs, that's, I'll get to that. Well, basically, a green withe is a bowstring. 7 green bowstrings that were never dried, then shall I be weak and be as another man. Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 green bowstrings which had not been dried. She bound him with them. Now there were men lying in wait, abiding with her in the chamber, and she said unto him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. He broke the bowstrings as a thread of tow is broken when it touches the fire, so his strength was not known. All right, so here's the story, okay? Samson's like, hey, babe, how are you so strong, and how could someone defeat you? Just theoretically, right? And if I'm Samson, I'm thinking, hold on, time out. That is an oddly specific question. You know what I mean? Like, why do you want to know how to destroy me? Why would you even word it like that in the first place? I'm going to be a little skeptical if I'm Samson. And so he gives her some crazy off-the-wall answer. He's like, well, you got to get 7 bowstrings that have never been dried, specifically that have never been dried. You know what a bowstring is? It's a string that they put on a bow to shoot arrows, right? It's that kind of stuff. And so they're like, tie me up with 7 of those, and I'm done for, right? And I just imagine the scene, like Delilah's like, okay, right? Pulls out her phone, she's like, bowstrings. You know what I mean? Like that awkward text where she's like, I hope he doesn't notice it. But it's so obvious what she's doing, you know what I mean? And so she tells him, okay, it's the bowstrings, get the bowstrings. Next time he comes in to the chamber, you know what that means, right, to the chamber, he walks in and she's like, they fall asleep or whatever. She's like, babe, the Philistines are here to take you, to kill you. And she's like, let's see if this works, right? And so he gets up, and the bowstrings are 7 of them wrapped around him, and it says he breaks them like a cloth to a fire. You know what I mean? Like a string to a fire just breaks, it snaps, and it says that no one knew where his strength was from. Imagine being Delilah in that moment. You're like, oh, good. You know what I mean? Like you're the one who just sold him out, and you're like, good. I'm glad you're alive, babe. Right? Like there we go. You know, like it's so awkward. How does she get away with this? I don't know. That's beyond me. But check out what happens in verse number 10. And Delilah said unto Samson, behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. Now tell me, I pray, right, wherewith you might be bound. I want you to take a note of this, guys. Seriously. Her response to this situation was, you lied to me and you made me look like a fool. Tell me the truth. Now, notice what she didn't say. She didn't say, Samson, I don't know how they found out, bud. I'm so sorry. I love you. I'm so glad you're alive, right? She didn't say, it wasn't me. I didn't tell him, right? She was just like, you made me look stupid. You mocked me, right? Why didn't you tell me the truth? Look, guys, if you're Samson, what are you thinking, right? You're like, wait a minute, right? How does you looking like a fool correlate to them attacking me? You would obviously connect the dots, right? It's very clear that she's the one setting him up. And she makes it clear. And for some reason, he doesn't catch on. Look at verse 11. And Delilah said unto Samson, behold, that's verse 10. And he said unto her, if they bind me fast with new ropes that never were occupied, then shall I be weak and be as another man. Delilah took new ropes, and she bound him with them, and said unto him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And there were liars in wait abiding in the chamber, and he broke them from off his arm like a thread. Are you getting a picture of Samson's strength here? It's pretty awesome. Nice biceps, right? Obviously. And so she's like, babe, you're mocking me, and I just want to know the truth. And he said, all right, fine. It's brand new ropes. Tie some brand new ropes around me, and I lose my strength. And it just so happens, right, coincidence, that a couple days later, he wakes up in the middle of the night to her saying, babe, they're back. They're trying to get you again with ropes around him. Brand new ropes. And he's still not putting it together. But he gets up, he breaks them off, he beats up the dudes again. I'm assuming, I don't know, we never actually found out all of the details there. But nonetheless, man, it keeps happening. Look at verse number 13. Delilah said unto Samson, up to this point, or hitherto, right, you have mocked me, and you've told me lies. Tell me how you might be bound. And he said unto her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head with the web. And she fastened it with the pin, and said unto him, the Philistines be upon you, right? Samson, and he woke out of his sleep, and he went away with the pin of the beam and with the web. So he just keeps getting more elaborate, but a little bit closer. So round number 3, guys, she's like, babe, you keep lying to me. Tell me the truth. And Samson's like, all right, fine. If you take my 7 locks of hair, or I'm assuming clusters of hair. I don't think he had just like 7 pieces of hair, really awkward head, but hey, whatever, right? He's got big biceps, so I guess it makes sense. If you take these 7, these locks of hair, and you braid them, and you braid them together, and you bind them with a pin, I lose my strength. And look, guys, I feel like you're not feeling the irony here. A couple days later, he wakes up in the middle of the night with that exact situation, and these Philistines running into his bedroom trying to take him. She's like, oh no, Samson, they're here again. And he defeats them all, right? Like I feel like we've overheard this story, but this is ridiculous. It's getting crazy now. Because over and over and over again, the exact thing he's telling her that he is trusting her with is exactly what keeps happening to him. Why does he not pick up on that? I think he probably did. And he just doesn't know what to do or doesn't care or what. It blows my mind. Verse number 15. Here's where it gets good. Same thing that Samson was told last week. We hear it again, fellas. Get ready. Verse 15. She said unto him, how can you even say that you love me when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times, and you have not told me where your great strength lies. And it came to pass, when she pressed him daily with her words, and she urged him, that his soul, the word was vexed. His soul was vexed, look at that, unto death. Dramatic much, right? Verse 17. That he told her all his heart, and said unto her, there has not come a razor upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I will become weak and be like any other man. So you gotta, guys, stay with me, man. Stay with me. Here's what happens. I guess the 3rd time's not the charm. The 4th time is. So she comes back and she's like, babe. She's like, seriously, you've got to tell me because I'm tired of looking like a fool. You must not even love me, Samson, right? Which, guys, take note of that. That's exactly the same line that got him last week. Remember that in chapter 14? She walked up and was like, you don't even really care about me, right? And so we're seeing some habits here, right? She says, how can you even say you love me if you won't tell me the truth about this? And he's like, fine, right? It says that she actually nagged him for a couple of days. And it said that it almost killed him, right? So seriously, guys, don't underestimate the power of nagging. It almost killed a strong dude, okay? He almost died from this. And he's like, fine, I'll tell you. And it says this. It said that he shared all of his heart with her. He opened up his heart, right? That's exactly what it says. That he told her all his heart. He laid it all out there, man. No reservations, nothing holding back, no secrets, no more hiding. Here's the truth, Delilah, because I trust you now. He laid his heart out there. And look what happens in verse 18. Listen, guys, this is the saddest verse of this passage. And when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines. Think about that for a second. When she realized that the guy that she's been staying with, sleeping with, living with, had actually finally opened up, revealed himself, not kept anything back, but laid it all on the table, her first response was to go to his enemies. Does that not break your heart for Samson? You're like, dude. Because we've understand what it's like to be abused in that way, right? To lay it all out there and watch someone just make a mess of it. And it hurts. And I feel for him, man. And so essentially what happens is, we just read in verse 18, she goes and gets the lords of the Philistines. Pick up in the middle of it, she says, come up one more time, for he has showed me all his heart. And the lords of the Philistines came up unto her. They brought money in their hands. She made him sleep upon her knees. She called for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. And she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he awoke out of his sleep and said, I will go out as at other times before, and I'll shake myself, I'll make myself free. Look at this. And he did not know that the Lord was departed from him. But the Philistines took him, they put out his eyes, and they brought him down to Gaza, and they bound him with chains, fetters of brass, and he did grind. He worked as a slave in the prison house. Wow. Talk about a dramatic ending. So that's how the story ends. He finally shares his heart with this woman. She betrays him. They show up. They defeat him. He didn't even know that the Lord wasn't there anymore, right? They defeat him. They gouge out his eyes. They blind him. They take him away as a prisoner to work for the rest of his life. We actually find out that that's where he's going to die. He goes out swinging, but he dies there. What a brutal story, man. What a tragic ending. Listen, y'all, what a terrible relationship. Like on the list of really bad relationships, this one probably can be listed pretty high. You know what I mean? Like, this is awful, and it's tragic. And so, once again, man, just like we did last week, and I'll hurry this up, I just want to ask the question, what got them there? Right? What decisions did Samson make that resulted with this, that destroyed this relationship, right? What mistakes did he make that we can learn from, and in turn, if we want to end up like him, we can make ourselves? That's the whole point. So, really quickly, guys, I'll go through these. But here's what we learn, I think, from this passage. The first thing is this. My clicker's not working again. So, there it is. Samson made a few destructive decisions, just like we saw last week. The first one he made was this, man. Samson, one of these destructive decisions was he never learned from past mistakes. So here's the deal, guys. If you want to end up like Samson, here's all you got to do. Never learn from your past mistakes in your relationships. I promise you it'll happen. I promise you'll end up with some sort of destruction. And it just blows my mind, man, because I know last week we ended on a really high note about our mistakes in our relationships, about how God redeems those. We talked about that last week. But as I was reading this, man, I couldn't figure it out, right? It just blew my mind how he repeated his mistakes over and over again. The exact same thing that happened in the relationship before, in the marriage before, is happening again, right? He made a bet with some Philistines. His wife came to him, batting her eyes, wore him out, and he gave up the information that he never should have. And you just change out some of the details, and it's the same thing. He's doing the exact same thing that he did the relationship before. It's the same story, just different details. And because, listen, man, he made a wreck of his first relationship, but he didn't have the wisdom to learn from it and to be different this time. That's just the bottom line. And again, bro, we've all been there. We've all had relationship mistakes. We've all made those errors. And listen, guys, this doesn't even have to be just applied to dating and friendships and whatever it is, man, with your family. We've all made those mistakes. But the tragedy is, many of us are stuck in a cycle of making them over and over again, the same thing. Here's what I've learned, guys. Look at me. Our generation is consumed by this dating topic about relationships. I look at every other college ministry, and listen, man, I'm not saying it's not needed. I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for what's being presented out there. But there are so many books, there are so many seminars, there are so many conferences, there are so many series, there are so many whatever about dating. And here's the truth of it, guys. Look at me. Never at another point in history have we had more access to more resources about how to date well. So why do we keep making these same mistakes? Why is it that we have such a hard time dating? And the truth of it is, it's not because we're ignorant, because we don't know enough. It's because we're not disciplined and we don't actually work things out as we grow and learn. Say, Austin, that's really harsh to say. It is, but it's true. I could give you examples, guys, look at me, of people I care about, of conversations I've had in this building about mistakes in dating relationships. And I can tell you that some of the people I'm thinking about aren't here tonight because they're out there making the same mistakes. And I know it for a fact, even though we sat in here and talked about it. Look, guys, man, if you don't learn to take these mistakes, to grow past them and to use them to grow forward, you are going to find yourself in a constant cycle of destruction with every relationship you get in. I promise you. A quick and sure way of destruction in your relationships is to never learn from your mistakes. I promise you, man. It will happen. Secondly, as I wrap this up, not only did he never learn to really grow from his past mistakes, we also learn this. If we want to destroy our relationships, we can just disregard any and all red flags. I promise you, man. This is a sure way to do it. Again, guys, the story begs the question. Everybody stay with me. Look at me. Why in the world did Samson stay? You know what I mean? Like the dude had to have known. Night after night, waking up with the same thing that he just told his girlfriend, right? And obviously it's very clear that she's trying to use it against him. Why would he stay? And truthfully, we don't know the direct answer. I can think of two good ones. Either he thought she was going to change and he was being gracious, which I would really call him being gullible. Or secondly, honestly, he was just pursuing lust even though he had no trust. You know what I mean? He loved what he was getting out of the relationship, even though he couldn't trust her at all, because he clearly didn't. That's why he kept lying. And those are the only two good answers I've thought of, but the truth is we don't know, man. And in truth, perhaps her deception was a whole lot better hidden from him than it is from us as we read it, right? We have the benefit of knowing what happens. And I don't want to downplay that. But I just want to know what made him stay, man. And here's the deal. It blows my mind because when we read this, guys, listen, there were obvious red flags. Obvious red flags. Does anybody in here know what a rip current is? Anybody ever been to the beach? Okay, all three of us, man, we love the beach. Everybody else needs to wake up. Yeah, you've been to the beach, and there's these things called rip currents, riptide, right? Essentially what happens is, as the waves crash, as they break, there is a current that is formed that heads back out into the sea, and it's a really strong current, right? It's pretty difficult, it's pretty dangerous. And so oftentimes you'll go to a beach or whatever, a lot of tourists or whatever, and you'll see these flags all over the place. So they've developed a system to let you know when these things are happening, right? So if you go to the beach, let me just give you a little pointers, right? A few pointers. Spring break's coming up, summer's coming up. If you go to the beach and you see a blue flag, that means that there is dangerous marine life, right? Hashtag sharks, I'm out, bro, right? You know what I'm talking about? Like I ain't sticking around for that. Blue means dangerous animals. Green, I think there's a green one. No, orange, that's what it was. Orange means it is moderately hazardous to swim. Now here's the deal. If you see, yeah, you're like, moderately, right? Like, what does that mean? If you see an orange flag, it means, it's kind of risky, but you could probably not die. Red means, hey, there's some extreme hazards. We're asking people to not actually swim at all at this point. But then there's actually a time where they have a double red flag. And if you've been to the beach, you've probably seen some of these flags like that. And the double red flag means this. The beach is closed. Go home. Don't get anywhere near the water. Because it is that dangerous to swim in. That's what it means. It means the beach is closed. Go home. You know what's tragic about that? Listen, y'all. Over 100 people die every year just in the United States from rip currents. From not recognizing these flags, going out for a swim, getting pulled out in the ocean, right, and not being able to make their way back. Over 100 people a year just in the United States. Because they don't see the flags, right? And I know you're like, man, that's not a significant amount of number. No, but it's 100 people. You know what I mean? And what's tragic about it is there was a sign that said, don't do it anyways. And they didn't see the sign. They didn't recognize the sign. The flags, right? The flags were there. They just didn't see them, man. They didn't pay attention. And listen, y'all, the same thing happens in relationships all the time. I see it. We disregard these tendencies, these red flags, these things that say, hey, maybe you should slow down or maybe not pursue this anymore. We disregard those because we say, well, maybe they'll grow past it. Maybe they'll get out of it. Maybe they don't realize it. Maybe it's not that big of a deal, Austin. And the truth is, man, it is. These red flags were important. For Samson, here's what the red flags were. Delilah's infatuation with his destruction. You know what I mean? Like, every conversation that they had should have been a red flag for him. Like, why do you keep asking me about how to destroy me, right? That's a flag in a relationship, right? I mean, seriously, I think it is. What about the coincidental attacks at night with the thing he had just said? Red flag, pretty massive one. Here's another red flag that we often overlook in this story. Her manipulative rhetoric about his lack of love. That's a red flag, bro. That's a red flag. She's manipulating him, saying whatever will get him to open his mouth. That's a red flag. And the truth is, man, listen, there are all sorts of red flags to look for when you're dating. Let me give you some. A lack of spiritual depth or lack of spiritual interest. We talked about this last week, man. If you're pursuing someone that has no spiritual depth or no interest in growing at all, that's a red flag. That's a make or break kind of thing. A lack of spiritual depth or interest. A lack of respect for authority. Seriously, guys, that's a red flag. You're going to have issues down the road if that's happening. Also, a lack of a work ethic. That's a red flag. a lack of control, whether that's verbally with what they say, whether that's with anger, or whether that's physically. If they subtly hint that they want to go farther physically with you and you're not comfortable with that, that's a red flag. There's all sorts of red flags like that. And you have to be aware of those. You've got to see those, or else you're going to end up, man, in a very similar situation, right? And listen, I'm not saying break up with everyone who has struggles, right? Like, oh, this dude gets angry a little bit. I'm not saying dump him. I'm just saying, like watch that. Take note of that. Is he growing in that? Is he pursuing Christ in that? You know what I mean? Like those red flags, don't ignore them. I'm saying don't make yourself vulnerable to people who are obviously not going to strive for your godliness and help you with that. And then lastly, guys, and I'm done. This is the most important one. I know we're running a little late today. I'll blame that on the bananas, which is actually true. So here's the last one, guys, and this one's very important. I know the other two have been kind of basic, these are what we expect at a dating series. This one, you may have heard 1,000 times, but it is so important for our generation, and I'll be done, I promise. Lastly, this. Never learn from past mistakes, disregard any and all red flags, and give someone the benefits of a spouse without the commitment of a marriage. That's this story, guys. Give someone the benefits of a spouse without the commitment of a marriage. I promise you guys, it's destructive. And look at me. It's everywhere in our society. It's what's expected of dating in our society. Say, Austin, what are you talking about? Here's what I'm talking about, man. You got to keep in mind as we read this thing that Samson and Delilah aren't married. He married the first girl. That didn't work out, right? So we know he slept around with some other people in between. He finds Delilah. He falls in love. He's like, I'm not going to mess with that. I'm not going to mess with the marriage stuff. Let's just get together, right? And so now he just kind of lives without marriage, and it ends up, listen, y'all, it ends up being more destructive than the first time. And here is why. Listen to this, guys, please. Delilah wasn't committed to him, but he treated her like she was. He treated her like she was. Samson gave to her what exclusively belonged to his spouse. And she didn't want that. And that's what got him there. Now, I'm not saying there would have been a different ending had there been rings and a ceremony and a piece of paper from the state. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying I think there's something to learn with the way this played out and how they went about it. And you're like, Austin, what are you talking about? What did he give to her that he should have not? I got a couple things. First thing is this, intimacy. I know we're like, ew, what does that mean, right? It means sex on one hand, but it also means something more than that. It means emotional intimacy, mental intimacy, leaning on someone in a way that's unhealthy and ungodly. And Samson did that. Well, for one, we know, right, physically, we know his reputation, right? They were sleeping together, guys. They were, no doubt. And that was outside of God's arrangement, his design for marriage. And so we know that that's destructive on its own, right? They were engaging in sexual intimacy. And we talked about this a few weeks ago, right? God has preserved, he has reserved that privilege, that good thing, right, to the married relationship between a husband and a wife. And we know that they weren't engaged in that healthy way. But even past that, man, Samson was emotionally intimate with her in ways that he shouldn't have been. She had him wrapped around her finger. Not just intimacy, influence. Think about it, dude. Think about it. Samson also gave Delilah full reins on influence. He knew, look at me, guys, he knew that she should not know about his strength. And yet she broke at him, she kept going at him, she kept nagging, she broke him down, and she influenced him to do something that he knew was wrong. It's influence. I see that all the time in relationships. All the time. We get invested in these things, and they begin to influence us, and before we know it, we're doing things that 2 months ago we would have never done. It happens all the time with young adults. And then lastly, and this is the big one, man. Intimacy, he gave her intimacy when truthfully they weren't at that level. Influence and then confidence. And that's the one that breaks my heart. Samson gave her his confidence, right? He surrendered it to her fully, right? At the end of the day, at the end of the story, she had his heart. And what that means is this: there was no reservation. He wasn't holding back. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't pretending to be someone else. He was fully there, fully engaged. He had given her his confidence, right? And she used that to destroy him. Listen, guys, I'm done. But let me just drive this point home, and then we'll be out of here. Please, look at me for 2 seconds. Please, don't give these things in full. Don't give these things in full to just anyone who will take you to a movie and dinner. That's not what it's about. Don't just give these things away. Listen, I know how badly we long for these things. We want this intimacy. We want this confidence. We want this influence. We want that relationship where we can stand before someone and be totally ourselves. I get it, right? We want that. And that's not a bad thing. But listen, y'all. God has designed a place for that. And those boundaries, that context in which He's designed it, is not to rob us of it now. It's to make it the most fulfilling it could be. In every aspect. I'm not just talking about sex. I'm talking about in every aspect. God is not trying to rob us of that. We've talked about that a lot. He's designed us for that. So I know that we all long for it. And I also know this, guys, that our society paints marriage in a bad light. Because really, in our society, most people fail at it. I get that. And I get that our generation is growing up thinking, why even bother with that? A lot of college campuses, man, are thinking the same thing, right? Marriage is talked about as if it's outdated and disposable and not worth your time. And I've got really good news that's difficult, but they're wrong. They're wrong. Man, God designed us for these things, for intimacy, for confidence, for influence, to be real with each other. And He gave us a place for that to flourish, man, to flourish. The problem is, listen, we don't wait for it. Say, Austin, I'm not married, and you know what? Maybe you're in here and you're like, and I've not ever been intimate with anybody, so this doesn't apply to me. It may, because it's not just physically. Some of you guys build your life on a relationship. Your identity, your confidence, right? Your self-esteem is determined by what some guy or some girl says about you and how they feel about you. You're giving to them something that they don't deserve. They don't have a right to. All of that, man, all of that plays into it. So I'm begging you guys, regardless of what our society is doing, don't give someone the benefits of a spouse without the commitment of a marriage. I'm not saying don't get deep on a date. That's not what I'm saying at all, man. Yeah, learn, get to know each other, find out their hopes, their dreams, their insecurities. Get that, because all of that is part of the process of determining whether or not they are that spouse. But I'm saying this, right? When we rush God's plan, we rush into this depth, we make ourselves vulnerable, listen, to a heartbreak that God never intended for us to experience. I see it all the time. Students, college students, young adults, grown adults, all adults, everybody. Man, they get so invested into a relationship, more invested than is healthy, more invested than is wise, and they walk away broken because they didn't understand its place. So guys, if you want to ruin your relationships, don't learn from your mistakes, right? Disregard all red flags and give someone the benefits of a spouse without any commitment of marriage. And I promise, it'll do some damage.